And what a dummy! Welcome back to the Fantasy Rugby Draft podcast. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson, and joining me again in the booth is the man primarily made of moss, Nathan Mossman. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Do you think people realise that we film this in front of a live studio audience?
Happy St. Patrick's Day, mate.
Yeah. Sadly, no Guinness as yet, but still early.
No Guinness. I had a whole start thing lined up, a few questions lined up for you, but something popped up on my newsfeed that I thought I'd get your reaction to first. And it's a tweet that's from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And it says, disaster averted at Pyongyang Aquarium as Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un saves children from renegade killer whale. I thought I'd come to you for a quote.
He's a remarkable man. Is what I would say. His list of achievements is long and thoroughly, what's the word? Bullshit.
Unconfirmed reports were that the killer whale had lasers on their heads.
Oh,
unconfirmed at this point, though.
This is to combat the sharks with laser beams as well.
Indeed. We're recording this Thursday, March the 17th, St. Patrick's Day. We're going to discuss Team Naming Thursday, TNT. We're going to pop into Review Corner. We've got a few new reviews. We've been a bit remiss there. And we'll get into a few recommendations for Game Week 4. But I guess first we need to really talk about a couple of injuries that we've had during the week. So I'm not sure on Monday whether we actually had the Naholo news that you dug a little bit more information out.
We didn't have a date. No. Now we have a date.
Okay. Roughly.
Oh, you want me to give you the date?
Yeah, why not?
22nd of April, apparently.
22nd of April.
Is when they're expecting him back for the game against the Sharks.
Okay. All right.
Which seems awfully precise for something that's just that far away.
It does, and it doesn't sound as soon as Tony Johnson and Justin Marshall were referencing in the game. That doesn't sound soon to me. That doesn't sound like it's coming back early. That sounds about right.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you're questioning the medical opinion of Tony Johnson.
I guess I am. Yes.
Dr. Tony Johnson?
Dr. TJ, that's right.
Yeah, how do you?
Okay, so we've seen a few people trade. I put a trade out there for one of our leagues in Straven Road for Naholo. I was giving up Naholo and Nizam Kar for Yako Creel based on that news. But that was turned down. Do you think that's right to turn down?
Yes, yeah, I do. I think at this point we've got some clarity. He's worth holding, I think.
Oh, you reckon? So you'd prefer to have the Naholo Kar side?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I just think over the longer term, Naholo's somebody that you want on your team.
Yep, don't disagree. Cool. And I guess the biggest one for those who drafted him is Nehe Milner-Skudder, out for the season now with a dislocated shoulder. I believe they're going to relocate it. But that's just a disaster. I guess, so what do you do if you've got Milner-Skudder in your team?
Weep uncontrollably.
That's probably the first cause. I think we talked about this the other day, didn't we? The stages of grief.
We did, yeah. So we're going through this again.
We are. So I think from a practical perspective, you need to evaluate your team quite closely. So you need to know whether you've got enough backup there to be able to carry that loss and pick up, say, a fourth or fifth string outside back that's obviously on the waiver wire, or whether you're probably more likely to see if it's going to make a massive impact to the rest of your team and you don't have great depth, is to look at your best player in another position, in a say a fly half or a midfielder or a loose forward, and you're going to have to package him up with someone else on your team to try and get a couple of really good players back, and give up your stud players. I know my personal preference when I'm doing a trade is to always, no matter how many people are in it, is to kind of get that stud player. But in this instance, where if your league's fairly active and there's not much on the waiver wire, then I think you are going to have to go via the trade. Is that kind of, how do you feel about trades? Do you take as it comes, or will you always like to get the star player? No,
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I'm just trying to improve my team as a whole.
Yep. And that's a really good point. I'll get onto that a little bit later. But I've got a couple of trades here. So I went and target sounds a little bit like profiling. I target the Milner-Skudder. I didn't want to prey on him. Targeted the Milner-Skudder owner just to offer some trade suggestions. So one of them was to Judge Rugby in the podcast league. And I offered up Willie LaRue and Bryn Hall for Rob Horne and TJ Perenara. So effectively, I'm upgrading Bryn Hall to TJ Perenara, but I wasn't really starting LaRue anyway. I had 3 starting outside backs, and I had Rob Horne and Willie LaRue and Lionel Mapo on my bench, so I could afford to let rid of those. But I think that's the type of thing you need to start looking at and may have to accept at some point.
Yeah, I guess I'd do a similar thing. I look at my own team, say, where do I think I'm strong? Who do I not need? Yep. And try and pass them off. And the reverse is true. Sometimes I look at other people's teams and I see somebody on the bench and I think, oh, okay, they don't rate him, or I quite fancy that guy. So, maybe we can get something happening there. And looking at their starting lineup perhaps on a particular week and just saying, well, he's missing somebody in that position. Perhaps I can offer from somebody. Yep.
No, agreed. And another one that I put out there was Combrink or Mapo for Yeko Creel. And I think that's probably right to get turned down. I know you'll probably say yes. But my other 2 outside backs were Julian Severe and Nadolo. So that was too much of a gap between Nadolo and Combrink, and it was just too rich. But you need to kind of toss around.
Yeah, it does. It depends what the rest of your team is like. I had a trade during the week where I gave away Tusi Pisi, and got Fred's, well, it was actually Tusi Pisi and Luaki Moli, who, to be honest, was just a make weight, to get Zalinga and Tuipulotu. And my thinking was just that Tusi Pisi was only ever going to be my backup, and I'm not that bothered about the backup, that I'm prepared to stick Zalinga in there, and I'm upgrading, I think, quite significantly in lock.
Yep.
And more I kind of feel that, well, I'd rather get the points in my starting lineup than worry about who my backup is.
Yeah, that's right. And we've seen quite a bit of that as well, as people now starting to dangle that extra bench player that they have that they may not start, or they're only got in there in case of injuries or bye weeks, to the people that are having problems with these types of injuries. And that's the smart way to do it. I had a question here from Rugby Fix. What's your preferred makeup of your bench? If you looked across your teams, out of the 6 positions there, have you got any kind of overlaying structure that you like to stick to, or is it very much based on how you drafted, where you were in the position that you're long at?
No, they seem to be relatively similar, and that would be, there tends to be 3 or so outside backs, possibly a backup midfielder, because I think, as we've discussed previously, they're quite difficult to come by, so if you can get one, it's good to hold on to. Possibly a loose forward, and generally there won't be a backup halfback, lock, or front row.
No, you've got a fly half, haven't you, and a reserve fly half, exactly. I think that's the same as me. So sometimes I'll push the envelope out, and it's almost like I'm flexing that 6th position between an outside back and a midfielder. But yeah, I definitely have a fly half and the rest. A lot of the time I actually don't have a loose forward on my bench, depending on who I've drafted, especially if I've got someone like a Pocock, Yako, Ardi. I was going to say Akira Ioane, but we'll get to that. All right. Okay, let's get into Team Naming Thursday, or TNT.
And boom goes the dynamite.
What the hell was that?
Yeah, that was our new jingle.
Scary.
It is. We pay someone a lot of money for that. Okay, so Hurricanes Force. I guess the big news from a Hurricanes perspective is that Dane Coles is back in the team. The saviour's there. People who drafted the Hurricanes front row can now kind of reap the rewards against the Force. Is that how you see it?
Yes.
Yep.
I'm missing Reg Goods.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Is that long term, do you think, or what?
I don't know. But he is usually good for some points, but obviously offset greatly by the presence of Coles. So that'll be interesting to see how he goes, though. He's been obviously out for a while, and I think it's a calf injury, which means he hasn't been doing any running. So, yeah, calf injuries are tricky ones where
they're pesky, aren't they?
Yeah, he wouldn't have been able to push it too hard leading up to this. So, he might be short of a gallop. We'll see.
Yeah, that's right. Interesting one to bring him back for. I thought they might have started him from the bench, as you say, those calves, give him 60 minutes to warm up on the stationary bike or something and then fly him on, but fair enough. Via Fafita coming in at blindside, he had a pretty good ITM and we actually ranked him fairly high, even though that he probably wasn't going to get much start. I think at that point we were thinking that Ardie Savea might be a little bit further away from in the sevens, or a little bit more committed to the sevens than he is at the moment, but I think he'll be a decent loose forward for this week.
Yeah, he got some good press last week coming out of the commentary box. That they were pretty interested in him.
Yeah, it was him and Peter Samo, the Crusaders guy, and the Tasman loose forward. If you watch much of the ITM, they're just ball in hand, just incredible pace, just beating players every length of the field tries. They're just highlights packaged, all bundled up. So it'd be good to see him get a run on like this. And I think it's Brad Shields, right? It's his thumb. Something like that anyway. For the Force, they've taken Luke Morahan out of the equation for us, and they've replaced it with Marcel Brecky, and another one as well is Jono Lance. So that's a big blow. For those who are counting on Jono Lance. At least it's not a bye week. We did have a question from Gus Neethling here, and it's a bit of an interesting one because we've got James Marshall playing in this game ahead of, in place of Milner-Skudder. He goes all right at 15. Would you play Peter Grant or James Marshall? Because they're both listed as fly half in the Fantasy Rugby Draft.
God, it's a pretty awful kind of decision to have
Isn't
to
it?
make. I'm assuming that this is hypothetical, right? No one's actually having to do
I hope so,
this.
Gus.
God, at this point in the season, because it's not like we've had any. Well, I guess perhaps if you sort of went with Jono Lance as your number one,
Well, you got Foley and Lance, maybe.
Yeah, I suppose it is possible, but it's unlucky. So, yeah, I think it will be Marshall. Yep.
So I said Grant is probably the safe play, but Marshall could quite rightly run amok and pick up quite a few points. I think Peter Grant's floor is high, so I think he could pick up like a couple of penalties and a conversion or something like that and get you 10 points.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Did you want to pull out anything from this particular game? It's in Palmerston North.
Is that sort of a cue to comment about Palmerston North? No, I'm not going to go there. I guess we look at matchups. So what do we think of this matchup? I guess on paper, it looks like a Hurricanes win, I guess you could think.
It does, but I will say the Force played quite well last year coming to New Zealand. Did they beat the Chiefs? I think they might have beaten the Chiefs, actually. And they put on a couple of good performances. Now, I'll put a little pin in that and say, they've taken Jono Lance out of the team and Morahan, who are significant players. But yeah, I don't know. On the paper, I think everyone's expecting this to be a coming out party for the Hurricanes at home. And hopefully it is. All right, Waratahs Highlanders. For the Waratahs, Wycliffe Palu comes in at 8, starting ahead of Jed Holloway, moves to the bench. And for the Waratahs, probably the only other significant bit of note, the change is to see Reece Robinson on the bench. For the Highlanders, Patrick Osborne, he's been ruled out, so they've got Ryan Tongia on the wing. And Matt Faddis and Ben Smith. So one of the questions we had, and I can't remember who this is from or who it from, was Dixon or Leguizamon? Because Elliot Dixon played quite well last week and scored quite a few points.
Yeah, I like Dixon actually. I think he's got a lot of potential, and I think he seems to be kind of growing as a player, and I think he features a lot more prominently, and I think he had a pretty big game in this fixture last year. Maybe it was the semi-final as well. So, yep, I'm actually expecting reasonably good things from Dixon here.
Yeah, Nick Phipps again. So a lot of people So we'll get to the Sharks team, but Cobus Reinach has been rested for Michael Claessens. So a lot of people are seeing Cobus Reinach out there on the waiver wire. And would you pick up, do you think that Cobus Reinach over the season will have a better season than Nick Phipps?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
I guess you're not going to pick him up this week. Would you pick up Cobus Reinach and put a donut at your halfback just to pick him up for the season? If you couldn't spare any of the other 6 bench spots.
Yeah. I guess it depends what the possible alternative would be in that spot. So,
yeah, okay.
If you were giving me an option of say a Klaassen, for instance, I'd almost prefer to take the 0 for Tim.
Sure.
If you were telling me that Phipps was available, I'd stick Phipps in there and let Reinach go.
Okay. Yep. That's the question. So we'll go with, yeah, fair enough then. So you'd let someone else pick up Cobus.
Yeah, I just think, like I was saying earlier, in a week-to-week game, you just need the points that week. You've got to win, try to win every week. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of worry about next week later to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, agreed. No, I guess the Waratahs coming off a bye should be fairly pumped up and settled for this. There was talk about Folau moving to 13, but to be honest, he's going to have 15 on his back, but he slots in at 13 a lot anyway. Him and Kurtley Beale rotate quite significantly, and David Horwitz drops in one. So I think it's just but a number on his back, potentially even just from set pieces. What else have we got in this game? Rob Thompson, second game up. Expect good things, middle things, bad things from Rob.
I'd say
going up
middle.
Against Horowitz and Horn.
Yeah, middle things. Yeah, I'm kind of covering old ground here, but I'm not that excited about it.
Cool. All right. Let's. Anything more from this match?
No, I know that you sort of brought up this idea of not playing somebody if they were coming off injury. Liam Squire's been named here,
sure.
and I know you might be a little bit cautious about that, but it was a sickness, wasn't it, that kept him out last week?
It was, yep.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit less cautious. I'm quite happy to play Liam Squire.
So Alex Greenleaf asked a question around that, and it's involving folks in this game as well. So Wycliffe Palu, Liam Squire, or Leguizamon?
Squire.
Look, I said I'm really hesitant to recommend players coming off injuries, and I was referring to Squire and Leguizamon, but I guess Palu is as well, so they're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
The only thing with Palu is we saw him come off the bench last week, so I suspect his injury, it wouldn't get pulled again, but yep, no, I agree. I think Squire's upside is more than Palu anyway, even if he does get pulled. Alright, let's go on to the Bulls-Sharks game. The only significant change really for the Bulls is dropping Travis Ismail and Yamba Yalingo coming in. So again, very promising things from him in the Currie Cup last year. We did have a whole bunch of questions, as you can imagine, on Yalingo and whether they should pick him up, what type of player. But one we had from Connacht Man was, would you cut Ndungani for Yalingo? And just to be fair to Connacht Man, this was before the Sharks team was named, so I think he was assuming that Ndungani would actually start where he isn't.
Yeah, so it sort of makes that question irrelevant, I guess.
I think so.
In some ways. And just looking at the team sheet, though, it does make me question the guy on the other side from him, Basson. Obviously put up big points 2 weeks ago. Would you pick Basson over Alingo if it came down to that head-to-head choice?
No, I'd pick Yalingo. Maybe
Okay.
I just like the new bright shiny thing.
It must be that.
Yeah, but we've talked about Basson before, right? He's such a hot and cold player. He'll get you 6 weeks of 2 points and then 43. And this game in particular, I'm not sure The Sharks shut down a lot of the Stormers outsides last week. Just wonder if it's a similar thing. But I was a bit surprised that Bjorn Basson kept his spot, actually. I thought it was going to go Ishmael Yalingo Halant, and Basson would be right in the pine, but they've gone the other way. And I think it may be something to do with what Brendan Nell referenced in the pre-season podcast, and that there's not much experience in that backline once you start taking out Basson and you put it in with Travis Ismail. You're looking at Brummer and Surfontaine as the only real guys with any sort of Super Rugby experience. So I don't know how much talking he does to Halant or Yalingo or Ismail when they're on the field, but obviously the experience is counted for something there. Or maybe they just can't drop a guy that scored 3 tries. For the Sharks, they've decided to rest a few players, or maybe I shouldn't say rest, rotate a few guys. And I think this is probably not far away from their first choice backline as long as Ronak comes back, but Mvovo back in. We had a few questions about Mvovo. I think people are putting him in the same kind of bracket as the Raymond Rules and Sagal Peterson, but I think he's a lot better than that. Where do you come down on Mvovo?
Yeah, he is a class above that type of player.
Step below Combrink and Mapo though, right?
Oh, he's definitely, absolutely, it's below that.
Yeah, I think you can do a lot worse than that. I've seen Mvovo be dropped a couple of times on a few waiver wire, on a few free agent lists, and I don't know, just thought it was interesting.
No, he's probably a decent option, say as your number 3. Right. So, for instance, if I was thinking about it, he might be a better option for your third outside back than somebody like Yamada, who obviously is probably a pretty hot pickup based on last week. But I just would have thought that perhaps over the longer run, that Mvovo is maybe a better option.
Yep, I agree. Yep, I'm quite a big fan of Mvovo. He scored quite highly in the one game that he's played this year as well. So it's good to see Jesse Creel back, just on the bench at this point. But it's good to see encouraging signs there. It's going to be interesting to see who takes that 13 and 12 spot when Creel does come back. Good problem to have. So. Okay. Anything more from the Bulls Sharks match? I think the Bulls was a fairly standard team that they've named. Sharks rotated a few. Hoping for a little bit more. What's this game flow going to be?
Yeah, I think we know what Coach Gary Gold's going to do. I think the interesting thing will be what the Bulls do, how they kind of approach this. It has all the makings of trench warfare, but then again, if you look at the back 3, say that the Bulls have picked, maybe they sort of feel like they want to change their image a little bit.
Yeah, I do wonder whether they just got caught cold in the first week against the Stormers, or whether the week 2 is, or the game week 2 is who the Bulls actually are. I suspect the Sharks are not going to be anywhere near the Rebels, so I suspect to probably see a little bit more of game week 1 type flow than game week 2 for the Bulls, but maybe they've sorted out quite a bit of their communication and starting to bed it in 2 games in that they're starting to find their feet. So let's hope so. All right, Sunwolves Rebels. So we just got the Rebels team. The Sunwolves team is fairly standard. They had changed 1 or 2 in the forward pack and 1 in the backs as well. But the main, I guess, talking point that people were asking about was TCPC. So he's been named in the team. Again, I'm nervous as hell. I hope that you wouldn't have to go with 2CPC on this game week, and I would potentially go someone a little bit lower than him just because the injury. He came on and off a couple of times, and I don't think it's like the Sunwolves to be too cloak and daggery this early on in the piece to name someone who is very unlikely to start. I think they're probably pretty straight up. Other teams I'm a little bit more sceptical about, but I think the Sunwolves are playing a bit of a straight bat. But would you start 2CPC with no problems? This is a Saturday game.
I think I would, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We did have, let's just, before we get on to a couple of questions from some folks, the Rebels team that was announced, I think it was pretty much expected. Same thing with Tamati Ellison. He's been named. And Nick Serzak is on the bench as well. So Ben Meehan starts, and against the Sunwolves games that we've seen in the last two games that they've played, or the 2 games that they've played, it's been fairly helter-skelter, and the halfback's actually done okay. So I wouldn't shy away from Ben Meehan if you want a little bit of a smoky for one week or this game week, and you're battling around for halfbacks. I think Ben Meehan's probably not a bad shout. Anything more from the Rebels team, really, when you look at it? It's pretty straight ahead.
It is pretty straightforward, yeah. I guess the only thing I would say about both team lineups was when they were announced on Twitter, I guess it came from some Japanese rugby website, and it looked like the opening credits to an episode of Power Rangers or something. You just expected the players to have laser beams coming out of their eyes or something like it was pretty cool. We like that.
It was really well done. We had a question from Michael Hall. So pick one, Shipperley, Nabuli, or Yalingo.
I'm going to stick with Shipperley.
I think so too.
He's the safe pair of hands there.
Yeah, I think so as well. That's who I said. And out of Nabuli and Yalingo?
I'm going to say Yalingo, I think, actually.
Okay, all right. I might go the other way. I'm always a little bit hesitant. I want to see the player first and how he goes, and that's the only thing that's holding me back. But it's the same thing we're going to talk about with the Blues with Rico Ioane, I guess.
What if you've seen him and he's rubbish?
I'll go Nabuli. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I take the point. LaRue Viljoen, he had a question as well. He wanted to know whether to go his namesake, Viljoen, or Tongia.
Tongia has actually, interestingly enough, been quite a high scorer whenever he's had a run in the team.
He did, didn't he? Last year, I remember that.
Yeah, he did.
2 or 3 game stretch that he had was really good.
That's right, yeah. And I think the Matt Faddis thing shows you, and I think you even said it, that there is some value in being a Highlanders winger. Even if you don't have to be the most talented guy in the world, you'll get chances just because of the players around you. So, yeah, I think I'd probably stick with Tongia if I just had to take a shot for 1 week.
You're not worried about the much vaunted Matt Carrara defence?
Well, he's another one that might not have had much sleep recently, so.
Yeah, true.
Might be asleep at the wheel.
Down King's Crossway, is he? Crusaders Kings. So Todd Blackadder has taken the opportunity to rotate a few players. I guess the big talking points for fantasy is Johnny McNichol coming in for Johnny McAloy, and the other one is Jimmy Tupou, who was listed as a lock in Fantasy Rugby Draft, scrimming down at number 8. So those are the significant points. I guess David Havili coming into 12 and Marty McKenzie at 15 are other interesting points to note. But first of all, I guess I'll go back to Johnny. What to do about Johnny?
I think he's going to have some decent value in here. I would have been rating McAloy pretty high if he was starting. So I guess the same thing must apply to McNichol.
Yep.
I think we're all kind of expecting this to be, a bit of a walk in the park for the Crusaders, I guess.
I agree. I think, we are against the Kings. The only thing I have a worry about, if you've held on to Johnny McNichol and you've got him in your team still in your squad, great. Shove him in, you pay the dividends, he should be rewarded nicely against the Kings this weekend. The problem is if you've got Johnny McAloy in your team and Johnny McNichol's a free agent in your league, what do you do? Do you pick up Johnny McNichol in the hope that he plays the rest of the season, even though that it's been Johnny McAloy's job up till now? Or do you think this is a short-term or long-term thing for Johnny McNichol?
Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? That I don't think we're really in any kind of position to answer. I guess if you looked at it completely in isolation, you might say, as you pointed out, take an opportunity maybe to rest some players with a slightly easier game. Yep. Would McAloy be one of the players that would require resting? I guess on the surface of it, you'd think no.
No, I don't think wingers do, but we're seeing it more and more. You just need to speak to Tana Umaga. and see what he thinks.
Yeah, I think what we could be looking at is probably the worst possible outcome, which is actually both of them getting some time.
Yeah, that will be. And especially because they've got such value if they're playing, so it's unlikely that you're going to be able to chop and change. You're going to have to nail your colours to the mast about one of them.
I wonder, it's not something that we've come across really, but in the NFL, especially in NFL fantasy, with the Patriots, and they have two running backs, usually one who was a bit of a bruiser and one who was more of a pass catcher. So a Shane Vereen and then
LeGarrette Blount.
LeGarrette Blount, someone along those lines. And they would try to figure out week to week, is this a Vereen game or is this like a Winnebago game? Yeah. But I wonder where we might see similar situations with players, like especially maybe halfbacks. And I know that we don't have a Chiefs team, but we won't see. But whether there's a Weber game and a Kerbalo game, and we almost saw that for a while, sometimes with the All Black halfbacks, didn't we? So it would be a Justin Marshall game if they thought he'd play against the South Africans.
Yep.
And then maybe someone else would play against the Australians because they were expecting a different kind of contest in terms of physicality.
When the pass wasn't going to get to the fly half as quick as the other one, then you play him against the South Africans.
That's right.
Because they're not going to get to him as quick.
Yeah. So that's a long way of saying I have no idea.
Yeah, okay. I don't know either. I think all we have to go on is that the rest of this is rotation. So it strikes me that this is rotation, that it's Johnny McAulay's job. So I wouldn't be rushing out to drop Johnny McAulay for Johnny McNichol for this one game. Matt Todd come back as well, which is great news. Again, probably a little asterisk. I'd like to see him play 20 minutes first off the bench. Before I thrust him into a Saturday game where I've got my hands tied, but let's see.
I think the thing is for most people, if you drafted Matt Todd like I did in one league, and you've had him sitting there, you've probably been rotating through some pretty average players in that position. Mm-hmm. And I think if you were, let's say for instance, putting an Arno Botha in versus a Matt Todd, I think it's probably still worth having Matt Todd in there, especially because there's that opportunity for him to maybe score from a maul or something. Mm-hmm. And in this game, I mean, God, who knows what the score might be? I mean, anybody could get on the score sheet here. So I still think.
What about if it was a better loose forward? What about if I was talking about Elliot Dixon, Wycliffe Palu, or Leguizamon?
I think I'd still take Todd.
Still take Todd because of that potential upside?
Yeah, I think it's really close between him and Dixon. Yeah, sure. If the matchup was reversed, it'd be no question, it would be Dixon. Mm-hmm. But it's not, so yeah.
Yeah, and I think looking at the makeup of the reserve bench as well is that it's likely that, because this is first match for Luke Romano as well, so it's likely that he's going to be subbed off at some point, and Pete Sama will come on and Jimmy Tupou will move into lock. So I think you'll probably get 80 minutes out of him. What about Marty McKenzie? Good to see him in there.
Yeah, I actually had somebody asking me earlier today about whether they thought he would kick goals.
Just on the high street?
Yeah, I get recognised all the time. It's I try not to attract attention, but it's difficult. So I thought it was, in some ways I told them it was a stupid question, which is obviously what you do when people stop you and ask you questions. But it's it just seemed like, why would they switch kickers? Yep. There just didn't seem to be any reason why they would.
No, look, I didn't give it a second thought.
No,
I wouldn't. Unless Richie Mwanga does two of those kicks, those deliberate kicks to Ndolo in the corner, then it's unlikely we're going to see Marty McKenzie in there.
Maybe if Marty McKenzie catches one of his kicks, then he gets to take the kicking. That's how it works.
Force him back type rules.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, I like it. We haven't got a Kings team sheet, so I'm going to learn my lesson from last week where we don't have a team sheet. Don't waste airtime because it's all just vapor and everything changes when team sheets get announced and the Cheetahs and Lions play back up. So I'm not going to try and second guess going on the Kings.
Let's face it, you're not playing any Kings in this game.
No, you're not. No, that's probably an easy way to make it. Yeah. All right. Anything more from this match?
No.
I don't think so either. Okay. Reds Blues, another week, another merry-go-round of Tāna Umaga. What do you make of it? So the bigger changes are Patrick Tuipulotu coming in at lock, Rene Rangers being benched for Uncle Rico Ioane, and Luatua's coming at 8, and Akira Ioane's on the bench.
Yeah.
Help me.
It's times like this that I wish the great and glorious leader of North Korea was in charge of the Blues, because he does a lot of awesome things, and I'm sure he would have picked Akira Ioane, because he's a very smart man.
Yeah. So he's gone for a 5-2 split on his reserve bench. So people were asking about Milani Nanai and where's he and why isn't he even on the bench. I suspect he would have been on the bench had there been a 4-3 split, so 4 forwards and 3 backs. So they've gone with Billy Guyton and Matt McGahn on the bench, whereas I think if there was going to be that third back, it would have been Milani Nanai. But Tāna's reasoning was that Brisbane is going to get very, very hot and sweaty, and he's worried about his forwards and fatigue. So he's put an extra player on that bench. For the Reds, that's a pretty settled team. I say settled, it's the same team. Apart from, I think, that one of the front rows, Benny Daly, might have been out, tore a pec or something like that. But for the most part, the fantasy relevant players are the same. I had a question from a friend of the podcast, Justin Pivus. Joaquin Tuchelet, Uncle Rico, the Fish, or Nabuli?
Okay, so we're not expecting Tuchelet to play, though, are we?
We are. I am.
We are?
Yep.
Okay.
So put him in the mix and assume he's starting for now.
All right. Okay. I think I'd go the Fish first, maybe. Oh, it's between the Fish and Tuchelet anyway for number 1.
That's interesting. Okay.
And then I think Rico afterwards. I'm just really not sure what's going to happen in this game. Like it's one of these games where it wouldn't surprise you to read in the paper the next day that it finished 40-something to 30-something, and equally it wouldn't surprise you if it was 6-3. Yeah. You know, anything could happen because it's two teams that are fairly hot and cold, and they could both sort of bring each other down to a particular level, or they could just go all guns blazing, and it's really hard to say.
I agree with you. I think it's the Fish to start with. I would have him as 1. I might take a roll of the dice on Uncle Rico though. That lineup, that Reds team, I think there's just, you look at what Tom English did last week, and you look at what Shipley did even as well, just to a lesser extent, but he was very good in sevens. I guess the one thing is that I want to see it a little bit first. All right, Gorham-Hara were on the bench again, but they persisted with Jake McIntyre again as well. So
it's always good to have a world-class goal kicker on the bench.
I've heard that somewhere before, indeed. Okay, we haven't got any team sheets for the Lions or the Cheetahs, so we'll move swiftly along to the Stormers Brumbies, where we don't have a Stormers team either, but we do have the Brumbies team, which was the same team.
The Brumbies team is the easiest discussion that we have every week.
It is.
And it's been that way for a couple of years now, I think, as well. The only guy we ever talk about is Aiden Tua, and it's kind of more comedy value as much as anything else.
Ding, ding, ding. I was about to bring him up again. So, interestingly enough, so Robbie Coleman is on the bench. I think as long as they don't pick up an injury to Matt Tamur or Tavita Kuranjani in midfield, it'll be really interesting to see when Aiden Tua gets the hook, and Robbie Coleman gets his boarding pass, shall we say. Because I think that'll go a long way to figuring out whether it's Tua's job or whether it's Coleman's job.
Because it might be one of those things that it just suits the balance of the team better to have Coleman on the bench, maybe. Yep,
that's true. We had a question from Andre Muller on the Twitter. Nick Spate.
Beautiful.
Henry Spate, Tuchelet, or Corey Jane?
You sure it's not Jane Corey or something else?
It could well be.
I think it's always going to be Spate. I know it's an easy answer, and it didn't score a lot of points last week, but you felt like there was more an anomaly as much as anything else.
Yeah, you win more than you'll lose with Slate in your team.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's the order that you read them out in.
Yep, I agree.
And I'm not just saying that because it's easy.
No, indeed. And actually, it's been a bit of a first on this podcast. So, one of the guys who was one of the top managers, Reece Labuskakny, dropped us a note, and he said, paraphrasing it, that congratulations on not doing the worst job in the world on pronouncing my name. So I thought that should be put out in the podcast as Bruce 1, English language 10,000.
So you're saying there's a chance?
That's right. I'm on the board. Okay, there's another question from Sebastian Tremblay. Matt Fadders, Cordero, Tamani, Havili, and Murray. So pick 3.
Right. I'm sure you and I will be agreeing that Big Joe.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Number 1.
Yeah. Big 100 kg Joe.
Not many players I'd start over him at the moment, right?
No, there isn't.
An outside back?
No, he's right up there. Yeah. Cordero.
Yep.
I think. I'm coming around a bit to him, and I think the fact that he's playing fullback that helps. Mm-hmm. First home game and all that. And then we haven't got a Cheetahs team sheet, but I think looking at what happened last week, and obviously take the tries out of it, I still think Moraes has probably that high floor. So I'm not expecting a repeat of what happened last week for Fadders, whereas I still think that Moraes can, score reasonably heavily.
Okay, fair enough.
You disagree?
I'm not 100% sure that Dan Moraes will be starting. Maybe I'm wrong and I've completely misread this, but I thought that the Cheetahs starting lineup would be Zillinger at 10 and Blumenkeys at 15. But I know other people have had the view that maybe it is, and maybe I should pronounce it right, Neil Murray at 10 and Zillinger at 15, which is I've heard as well.
Okay. I mean, that would make me happy based on my trade. The trade was actually with a friend of the podcast, Andrew from Fantasy Rugby Scout. So if that was true, then I would have traded with him and got Patrick Tuipulotu and basically given away nothing essentially because the whole premise of it was that he needed a starting fly half, and I told him that Fred Zillinger would not be starting.
Yeah.
So I guess the moral of that story is don't listen to me. at least if we're trading anyway.
So for me, I think I'd still go Matt Fadders in that third spot. I would go Tamani, Cordero, and Fadders. But I understand if Murray is named, there's probably going to be quite a few points in that Lions Cheetahs game. So it's a bit of a shame that we don't have any team sheets on there. But I guess just wait and see what they come out with overnight. So void of any team sheet, is there anything from that Lions Cheetahs game that you wanted to pull out? Do we have any injuries or any points of note during the week that you wanted to talk through?
I guess the thing that I'd kind of noted was with Cobus Reinhardt being rested, and there is, I guess there's going to be a situation probably that a few people are in where they're looking for a halfback. Now, Sean Venter scored a few points last week. If he's named, it could be interesting. We've got Faf de Klerk in that game as well, who's kicking around. But then there's these other halfbacks, Mitchell Drummond for the Crusaders. We haven't seen the Chiefs halfbacks. We don't know. If you were picking a halfback out of Venter, de Klerk, Drummond, who do you think you'd go for?
Faf.
You'd go for Faf?
Yep.
Okay. That's interesting. I picked up Drummond, actually.
Were the other two available?
Yeah, all of them were, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Interesting.
No love for Faf.
No. Yeah, he was on waivers, so someone had dropped him. I don't know who they'd gone for instead, but yeah.
Lions are at home, right?
They are indeed.
We saw what they did at home. Faf was incredible last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yako and Combrink really came out of their shells at home. I read an interesting soundbite that apparently the Cheetahs are focused on defence this week. Which is really good.
They seem to struggle to put both sides of the game together. Perhaps. Yeah.
No, look, I'm a big fan of Faf de Klerk. I have him quite highly rated in FRD at the start of the season. I've seen nothing to change that, and the Lions had a very good start to the season. Mitchell Drummond, though, I guess the appeal is the matchup, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the fact that he looks like Shermanator.
It does look like the Shermanator, yeah. And
two very strong points.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards him based primarily on the second one.
So it's based primarily on Moss and primarily on matchup. I like it. All right. Anything more from the Lions cheaters?
Well, not a lot to say, really.
Isn't it? There isn't with that team sheets, and it's a bit frustrating. When we want to do this podcast on a Thursday night because we want the South African folks to be able to listen to it on Thursday, not everyone gets up in time for that first Friday game before the game week lock, so this is kind of the payoff that we don't necessarily have the team sheets for all of the teams that we'd like to discuss. I guess the same goes for Jaguars and the Chiefs. You got any players you'd like to pull out here? I have heard a pseudo Jags team, and I'll pull that up while you have a wee conversation with yourself.
I think what we're wondering here is what kind of game we're going to get. Being the first home game for the Jags, is this going to be some sort of high-scoring, free-wheeling kind of clash, or is it going to be something a bit more gritty? And I guess I'm kind of, what I've seen from the Jags so far, I'm kind of leaning towards the former. I think it actually could be quite high scoring. I think there could be some points in here.
Yep.
Yeah. So, it'd be interesting to see if Weber gets named, because I still quite like him as an option. The Chiefs backline, I guess it all kind of picks itself, really. There's no one you're not going to play.
Nope. That's true, if they're starting. And a pseudo Jags team that I've seen is Tuchelet at fullback, Cordero on the one wing, Maroney and Hernandez in midfield, and Boffelli on the left, Sanchez and Landasho. And then Rodrigo Baez and Leguizamon have been bracketed, apparently, on the blind side. So I think, would you plug in Juan Martin Hernandez? I know Coochie Town will be, if he's listening.
Well, the fact that he is a good reason for me not to.
That's because. Although we should call out that his League of Integrity is the Straven Road one now, which he's leading.
Is that right?
No,
I'm 3-0 in that, so interesting.
You're number 2. Okay. I think this will be high scoring as well. They've sold out 18,000 tickets. I thought that was a little bit interesting. I don't know about you, but when I heard Argentinian Rugby Stadium sold out, I wasn't expecting 18. I was expecting 30 or 40. But I guess they're just starting out.
Well, I have actually been to that stadium.
Have you?
It's stadium name dropper. But have I? Okay, I can't remember whether I was in Argentina or not. No, I can. I was 100% in Argentina.
So don't do drugs, kids, is the moral of the story.
Man, that was a crazy weekend. No, I'm just not sure it's the La Plaza Stadium that they played in for the test matches. So I went and saw the game against the All Blacks there when they first joined the Four Nations. The stadium they've got listed here is Buenos Aires, but it says the Valles Sarsfield.
Yeah, I think it's the cricket pitch out the back.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what it's not, and it's not one of the football grounds.
Right.
Which are obviously a lot bigger than 18,000, so yeah.
I think for health and safety they're listed at 90,000 or something, but they've got 160 on game day in it.
That's right.
So I think that'll be a great atmosphere, and I suspect it's going to lend itself. It's going to be interesting because here in New Zealand we get our first Sunday 10:30 in the morning kickoff. It's going to be difficult to try and get those overnight games in before the 10:30 kickoff.
I'm sure
it's going to eat into your brunch with your missus.
Or that would be the other way around.
Sure.
The brunch will be eating into the rugby you're watching. So.
Nice. Right, let's have a look at the waiver wire this week and look at who the biggest free agent pickups of the week have been. I'd like you to have a run at it. I know you haven't seen the results. Can you name me the top 5?
So is this before teams were named?
This was made at lunchtime today.
Okay. So I'd imagine
New Zealand time.
So would you say, as a general rule, that they're mostly based on last week's performances rather than... Okay,
yes.
Right. Okay. In that case, I'd say Yamada is probably there.
Number 2, 13% increase.
Right.
So he's now owned in 23% of leagues, which I think is still low.
Tom English is probably number 1.
3.
Oh,
yep.
Okay.
11% increase. He's now owned in 34% of leagues.
What about Neil/Daniel?
Daniel Moraes, number 1.
There we go.
17% increase.
I'm getting better at this.
You are getting a lot better at this. That's well done. And he's owned in only 27% of leagues. And Yanis Kirsten rounds out in number 4.
Yeah.
Still there.
Yep.
People still rising. It's good
Mm.
because he will get you points.
Yeah, big fan.
And we've talked about the GC Maori, Elliot Dixon. He's a 9% increase from 14. Up to 26%. Other interesting names on this list is Faders, Moli, Yolengo. Obviously, that's a team naming one. Tavita Lee, Bjorn Basong, Hendrik Tui, and Leo Zass.
Do you think the Molly one is basically from people that listen to this?
Maybe.
Because I can't think of any other reason why Holy Moly would have been picked up. Because it wasn't like he set the world on fire last week either.
No. Japan is frenetic about their Holy Molies, though. Perhaps it is something along those lines. Okay, now let's flip the tables and let's look at the top 5 cut players on this list. It's a difficult one this week. There's a layup and then there's a difficult. Next 4 are really difficult.
Right. So I guess once again to ask the question about whether this is based on someone having a duffy or whether it's based on team news.
The really obvious one you should get, and I'm not going to lead the witness on whether it's one or t'other.
Is it Milner-Skudder?
It is, yes.
Okay.
So, congratulations to those managers that aren't asleep at the wheel. They've acted on it pretty quickly to try and fill that position.
Tell me, as somebody who obviously is all-seeing, all-knowing across the leagues, have many people traded Milner-Skudder away to people who weren't awake at the wheel?
I don't know, actually. I haven't got that. I should pull that out, and actually I will do that over the weekend because I found... I've heard a couple of comments from a few people saying that I couldn't quite trade Milner-Skudder in time because the news was out there too much. I was like, okay, all right, fair enough. So that's your game.
Speaks to the moral fibre of the some of the players.
So the next 4 on the list are Geronimo, Matt McGann, Latu Vaino, and Lau Mapi. So
interesting.
Unlikely you were to get any one of those. I don't think I would have.
No, I wouldn't have either. So it's interesting that people are losing the faith in Lau Mapi. I guess I have a little bit. He's somebody that's on the bubble for me. Like I look at him on my bench and wonder about letting him go for somebody else, but I just haven't found anybody to replace him with yet.
For me, it's like the NBA playoffs. You're not in trouble until you lose at home. So it's like, for me, I want to see Lau Mapi at home. He's been on the road for 3 weeks. I want to see what this Hurricane teams does whilst they're at home comforts. I know it's in Palmerston North, which is a little bit here or there, but this concept of being home. So I think I'm not going to pull any trigger or make any drastic moves for any Hurricanes player until I see them play badly at home or not score very well at home. Okay, let's move on to... we've been a little bit remiss around reading out a few of the reviews that we got on iTunes, so thanks a lot for sending those in. Keep them coming, spreading the word a little bit wider. All right, so introducing Review Corner.
Cross back, they like it. Nathan Lyon looks at the umpire and says, I'm staying, so the umpire wants to have a look at it himself.
There's a mark on the back, but it could come from anywhere, so give it not out.
Thanks, Nigel. Very good. First of all, thanks to Mike at Rugby Fix. Cheers for your review, and also for Chris_Douglas. Thank you very much for your review. But the best one goes to this week goes to Simon Summers. So he says, I just listen for the Gary Gold moments. The rest of the podcast is pretty boring, with informative stats, insightful analysis, and the occasional special guest offering his views on the state of Super Rugby.
To be honest, I just listen for the Gary Gold bit as well.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I turn up.
Yeah. Thanks, Simon. Appreciate your review. So we should look at calling out a few players that are going to play well this week. Now, just to kind of frame what we try and do here for those that are listening to the podcast for the first time, is we don't want to tell you to start Julian Severe or Bowden Barrett. That's not really helping anyone out. We want to look at players that are generally not started in most leagues, so that you potentially have someone on your bench that you could put into your starting lineup this week. So it is generally looked at as the ownership is less than 50%. So have you had your thoughts about three for this week, mate?
Yeah, I think the first one for me, and I didn't mean to make it sound earlier like I was down on him, because I'm not, and it's Uncle Rico Ioane.
Sure.
I actually think, I mean, we've seen him. He's a pretty talented guy, and I think we always thought if he got an opportunity, he'd probably do pretty well with it. Here's an opportunity against a red side that is fair to say are struggling a little bit. So anything could happen here. You know, it wouldn't surprise you to see him, dot down a couple of times here.
Indeed, I think that's a great call. My starter out of the gate is Johnny McNichol. He's only started in 43% of league. I think that's a bit of an easy one, though. Starting against the Kings, he's going to be on the end of a backline that should get some decent penetration and not just be passing the ball side to side. Next one for you.
Another guy we mentioned briefly, Jimmy Tupou. I mean, we like any lock that's playing out of position, but especially one like him who's already demonstrated that he can be pretty handy with the ball in hand, and got a great matchup. I think the planets are sort of aligning for Jimmy here.
Yep, good call. For me, the next one is Tom English. I know you're probably a little bit more hesitant than I am with how he goes, but I think the matchup against the Sunwolves and rounding into some form, I like Tom English. He just picks up a lot of meters, and we tried to figure out whether it was a Kardashian. I want to throw another one out there for you, a Roger Twos or a Rigger, which is, they're out there for so long, you never remember them playing a shot or doing anything, and all of a sudden when you come in for afternoon tea, they're on 90 runs, and you're like, how the hell did you get that?
Yeah, I guess so.
Better than Kardashian, worse than Kardashian?
I guess I like the premise of it. I just think if I was thinking it would be a batsman who doesn't play big shots, but somehow just the scoreboard keeps ticking over.
That's my point. Roger Tews, who just got hit. He never actually played a shot. I don't think he still played a shot. Yeah,
but I guess my point is that he didn't, guys they score quickly even though you don't remember them hitting the ball hard, and you wouldn't accuse Rigger or Twos of scoring quickly, you know what I mean?
True.
So there will be other players, hopefully someone out there can think of one, a cricketer who just seems to accumulate runs quickly, and before you know it, he's on 30 or 40 odd and you don't remember him actually, hitting one. So didn't do it in boundaries, perhaps guy that's quick between the wickets. We're really digressing here into a discussion about cricket. So
Tom English.
Yes. Back to English.
So we like Tom English.
I thought if we could somehow come up with a concept of, some people allegedly go into strip clubs and,
what are these clubs you talk of?
Yeah, I've heard of it anyway, and come out with a rather large bill that they don't remember. It's sort of similar to that, where you're thinking, I don't remember seeing any of this, but quite large numbers are being put up, which is quite similar to the situation that we're talking about.
There could be something in that. Okay, we've got those. Anyone else for you?
I don't think there's anybody else that I'd be rushing out to start. Ryan Tongia, I think, is probably decent as well, because he'll be another guy that's available and should have a reasonable opportunity at least anyway.
Yeah, the only other one I've got a few listed here, but they're all names that you've heard before, and I don't want to go to overall with Gosan, and we haven't seen the team yet, but I think against the Cheetahs, it's probably not a bad play either. Ben Meehan should go all right against the Sunwolves. We've talked about Jonah Placid before. Nick Frisby, I think everyone's at the point where they know who he is now, but he's still only started in 37% of leagues. So there's still a little bit of educating doing there. And Leo's ass is probably someone that'll go all right. Can you believe that Tavita Lee's only started in 30% of leagues?
I can, because I've actually not been starting him either.
Okay. Fair enough.
So I guess I'm one of those people who's had him on the bench and is definitely coming around to it, but I'm still not 100% there. So
you would go Uncle Rico over Tavita Lee?
No.
No? You go
No.
Tavita?
No. But let me give you an example of a dilemma that I have.
Where to go for brunch on Sunday?
Here's my outside backs in one particular team. I've got Julian Sevilla, The Fish, Zach Guilford, Henry Spate, and Tavita Lee.
Okay. Yep. No, you're not starting Tavita Lee in those situations. Yep.
No. So
potential
actually,
trade bait there, though, right? You talked about that on Monday.
Yep. Yeah, there is. So actually, just going back to that just for a second, because obviously, might as well take the advice while I'm here. Would you play Henry Spate against those other three, ahead of those other three? Would you? I guess you're always starting Sevilla.
Yes.
Would you play him ahead of The Fish or Zach Guilford?
Over Guilford, yes.
You would? Okay.
Yep. Over The Fish? Don't know. I liked what I saw last week, and he was very much a strip club, whereas he didn't actually look like he did a hell of a lot, but he came out with 18 points. Yeah, I think I would probably still go Henry Spate, but I wouldn't mind having a bit of a 1 foot or something involved in that Chiefs backline against the Jags.
First world problem, though, right?
Yeah, exactly, mate, exactly. I wanted to introduce a new segment as well, and I want to get your take on it. I'm calling it Trade Tirade, and the concept is I want folks, we want to hear your worst trades that you've been offered. Send them into the podcast. We'll name and shame on the podcast. I wanted to see what people were offering out there. I'm sure you've been flabbergasted at some, and you've gone into a tirade over some of the trades that you've been offered, Mossman.
I have, yeah. And I guess sometimes it can be explained by perhaps the value that people place on players, and
true.
Sometimes it can't. But for some reason, people keep trying to get Ehire West off me and offering me derisory offers for him.
Magic beans?
Yeah, exactly. So it's I've had Vince Arso offered to me for Ehire West. Now,
it's a good starter for trade tirade, I tell you.
Yeah. So that infuriated me, obviously. Spoiled my brunch, but it's just one of those things where I think generally, if you can put yourself in the other guy's shoes for a second and think, am I offering him something that there's any remote chance that he might like? And I think in that case, the answer was an emphatic no. I don't think there's any planet that you could be on where Vince, and this is a team which the outside stocks were fairly strong. It may have even been the one that we just discussed just now. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't take much to look at that and see, hey, Vince Arso is of no use to me at all. Whereas Ehire West was my number one fly half.
Yep.
What is in that for me?
I know. And I think that's the difficulty that a lot of managers, and maybe that are a little bit new to the game and to the concept and to the product as well, is that they don't step into the opposition manager's shoes to review that trade. They're just putting it out there like, yeah, this is a good trade for me. So yes, it is. But also just a quick note on trades. If you piss someone off with a derogatory trade, or more importantly, if you kind of manage to pull a wool over someone's eyes, like that trade that you talked about, Ehire West for Vince Arso, you're only doing it once. Managers have long memories, and you're in your league for a long time. The leagues go on for years, 10 years at a time. I know you and I have been in a particular league for a long time. And if you start to piss some people off, your trading partners get really thin, and all of a sudden you're reducing the pool of players that you have access to. So you need to really be conscious that you're fostering a relationship here as well, is that you can't just go and ripping people off, because, as I say, they will remember next time you come to them with a trade and they won't even look at the trade and they'll turn it down. You need to both need to benefit, and you need to come out feeling as though, and you mentioned this before, you need to come out feeling as though you've upgraded your team. The aim isn't to rip someone off. So that's my quick trade tirade.
I don't think either of them was quick, but they were definitely both tirades. So
That's right.
It's quite cathartic. It's a bit of a therapy session, is it? Just sort of get out of your system.
It is. I'll tell you what though, it's part of the fun of this game in that you trade with your fellow managers, and it's really difficult because, as you highlighted earlier, everybody's got a different subjective view on players, right? So it's a real dark art trading and managing to get that trade over the line because, you're leaping into the unknown. You don't, there's always this buyer's remorse and this, what if I'm giving away the next Milner-Skudder, that type of the hesitancy. But if you get it right and you're both upgrading your team, it's a hell of a lot of fun. And I think, the more you're getting into the stage of the season, we discussed this the other night actually down at the pub, is that the first 2 or 3 weeks, over on the waiver wire has been madness. The first 2 weeks, shall we say. But the third week is much, much calmer and much less volume of waivers that are going through because people now have a fairly settled team. A lot of the players are now rostered on the individual teams, and now you need to start managing your team a different way via trade. So we have seen an increase in trades, which is great. Anything more for this week, mate?
No, I think I'm feeling very relaxed after that rant.
Enjoy. All right, you can follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Rugby Draft or on Facebook at Fantasy Rugby Draft. Or if you have any trade tirades, send us a mail on support at fantasyrugbydraft.com. Mossman's on at Nathan Mossman. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson. He's Nathan Mossman.
Make it rain.
El Tio Rapido.
What a bust here by Christian Cullen. Plenty of support, and what a